Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the Easter egg hunting riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Over the weekend, I attended defense and security meetings. Elected officials from Europe and the US were in attendance besides Canada. The news was stark. All indications are that Putin is preparing for war with Western Europe. Russia fired a missile into Polish airspace this past Sunday. And a few days prior, the Russian Navy was so trigger happy it sank a Russian boat by accident. What if that had been a boat from a NATO country? NATO allies consider an attack on one to be an attack on all members. The incident demonstrates how easily war can happen, even by accident. Poland has been preparing the nation as it watches the Russian steady march westward. Poland is now spending 4% of GDP on its military. Canada is allocating 1.38%. Without defense and security, Canada has nothing. A robust economy cannot be built on a crumbling foundation. Trudeau thinks everyone loves him so much, no one would ever strike Canada. Well, stuff happens. Peace can only be guaranteed through force. Instead of preparing to protect Canadians from those who despise Western society, Trudeau has turned his rhetorical guns on us. Instead of modernizing our Army, Air Force, and Navy as equipment rusted out, Trudeau blew the bank on fighting the weather. He appointed supporters to funding boards despite obvious conflicts of interest, sending a death knell to innovations that would have provided jobs and wealth for all. He executed social engineering programs and gave special rights to some while violating the rights of others. He let the bad guys in. He welcomed them all. Spies from communist countries who've stolen our intellectual property, deadly viruses transported from a level 4 lab in Winnipeg to the bio-warfare lab in China without authorization. Compare our present situation to World War II. Kids as young as 12 years old faked their ages because if they joined the military, they knew that they'd get fed at least one egg per day. This time, we have no ammunition, we have no battleships, and not a single order for ammunition. The smart thing would have been to ship Ukraine everything we have to ensure the war was won on the Eastern Front. But our petulant Prime Minister, more eager to set aim at Canadians, refused to give Ukraine what it needed when it was needed. Canadian parts and technology are still being acquired by Russia. People in Canada are making money off the slaughter of Ukrainians fighting the spread of war into Europe. Canadians prefer to gobble up fake news from Russia Today than tolerate Canada's paid-off media. If Europe gets sucked into the war, our sons and daughters will be sent to rescue them. It's what we did the last time. It's what will be expected of us again. Get ready. Reportedly, the Liberals have been holding back the release of the Defense Policy Review because they're afraid of the public's reaction. So what is the Defense Policy Review? Why is it important? And what's got the Liberals so spooked about it? The Defense Policy Review is basically Canada's military action plan. It states what the government believes are the biggest threats to national security, then lays out the details of a plan to address those threats. This allows members of Parliament, defense experts, and Canadians to see if the government has its priorities straight. It's also crucial for procurement and buying equipment. And that is why the Liberals are so afraid. Justin Trudeau has always viewed the military as just another department of the federal government. He has said that all departments always want more money, and his job is to balance those demands. That's the excuse Trudeau gives to ignore national defense in favor of more glamorous issues. But ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away. So, with Putin's second invasion of Ukraine, the Liberals panicked and asked the military for an updated review. When the defense team handed in the review, the Liberals saw the price tag for their negligence. As the Liberals have become more and more unpopular, their support has shrunk to a far left base. These remaining Liberals actively oppose defense spending. This leaves the Liberals trapped. They can do the right thing and announce the plans to make major defense purchases, such as tanks, submarines, or planes, but then they'd lose the support from the far left. Or they can do the wrong thing and delay a decision until Canadians throw them out of office. Which path do you think someone like Justin Trudeau will take? Let me know in the comments below. While Justin doesn't want to fund our national defense, he's all too happy to fund foreign interference in developing countries. Last week, Trudeau announced funding to support democracy. At least, that's how Trudeau defines it. Trudeau announced that taxpayers would be spending $8.4 million to support human rights defenders working on climate and environmental issues in developing countries. The term human rights defenders is a far-left dog whistle for political activists. On last week's episode, we exposed how Trudeau is funding a corrupt system of grants to media to hire activist journalists who write propaganda for the radical far-left environmental groups. That's bad. But to export this type of political activism to developing countries is foreign interference. It's kind of a green colonialism. And just as every tax dollar Trudeau sends to the legacy media undermines trust in the media, funding political activism in developing countries and democracies risks undermining trust in democracy. Justin Trudeau is proving Ronald Reagan was right when he said the scariest words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Last week, I received an email from a Globe and Mail reporter. Here's what she wrote, quote, "I'm working on a story about the country's growing reliance on the Canadian Armed Forces to respond to climate disasters. Data from a November 2023 committee meeting shows that disaster RFAs, requests for assistance, have doubled every 5 years since 2010. Are you available for your comment on your reaction to this growing demand? Is the Department of National Defense prepared for the upcoming wildfire season? Are there plans to expand non-military disaster relief forces, or is deploying the military to respond to climate disasters the long-term solution?" End quote. Well, first thing to notice is how this reporter uses the term climate disaster instead of the term natural disaster. This is all part of the trend amongst far-left political activists to encourage climate hysteria. That's why we've gone from the climate change to climate crisis. The next thing to point out is how she's using a single point of data to push a narrative that climate disasters are occurring more often. It's a great example of how confirmation bias works. Anyone already using the term climate disaster instead of natural disaster is biased towards believing any climate hysteria. A genuine reporter would have dug at least one level deeper into the evidence. So that's what we did. The data about provincial requests for assistance to the Canadian Armed Forces comes from the Defense Department. Here's what the CAF wrote. Quote, in 2021, the military responded to 7 requests for assistance for disaster relief from provinces and territories. This compares to an average of almost 4 requests for assistance per year between 2017 and 2021, and twice per year between 2010 and 2016. In other words, the CAF involvement in response to natural disasters has broadly doubled every 5 years since 2010. End quote. The Defense Department is claiming that request for assistance has doubled every 5 years, except there were the exact same number of requests from the provinces in 2010 as there were in 2022, that number being 1. Here's a chart breaking down the actual number each year and the type of disaster. What the full data set shows is that in Canada, there are an average of 2 flood requests per year. For 2015 and 2017 and 2018, 1 community in Northern Ontario accounted for 3 flood requests. Similarly, across the whole data set, we see an average of 2 wildfires per year. And even though they say the planet is warming, there were no blizzard or ice storm disasters big enough to call in the military from 2010 through 2016. Then we had 3 cold weather disasters in 4 years. Yes, last year set records for wildfires, but there were no requests for assistance for wildfires in 2022 or 2020. So, as you can see in this chart, fires in Canada have been trending down since 1980. The fact that the number of fires dropped so much in 2020 when people were in lockdown should set off considerable alarm bells about the source of many wildfires. This isn't arson or global warming. It's normal human activity from camping and forestry. The biggest factor driving fires after human activity seems to be El Niños. All this information is available readily. But if you are in the grips of climate hysteria, claims such as the CAF receiving double the number of requests for assistance go unchecked. Evidence which challenges people's faith in the Church of Climate Socialism is ignored. The government needs to increase funding for the Canadian Armed Forces. It doesn't need to resort to climate fear-mongering to do it. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant. How do we do?